the shoe dropped when ChatGPT came out and sort of woke up everybody that this is actually the need to act now. So maybe elaborate a little bit, what are the situations you're seeing currently in the market? And maybe also, it looks to me like the talent is still very concentrated around some of the large companies been focusing on Google, DeepMind, some of the universities. So the scarcity of the talent around this, but how does that play together with that massive surge in interest in this?
ChatGPT has been this catalytic moment where suddenly everyone can play with AI and understand what it is. And so I think it has made everyone really aware of it. It's caused a lot of generalist investors in the VC space to come in and want to put money into generative AI in particular. If you're building a foundation model company, and that's what these models are called, you really need to find the talent who's experienced in building it, or you potentially end up having to license it from someone else, or rely on open source, which is not quite the same. It has created this really significant frenzy to invest in the companies of the people who have that unique talent. For us, it means we have to know them earlier and develop a relationship where they come to us before they start the company and say, hey, we want to do with you what you did with Cohere. Or we recently did it with another company out of DeepMind, where we worked with them for months before they incorporated to figure out what is the business going to be, how is it going to work with customers, how we price it, what product, who do we need to hire. So the relationships, I think, make a big difference. And if you don't have them, and if you don't have the technical depth, you can, I think, as an investor, get caught into these kind of crazy bidding wars and really paying a lot of money for very early businesses, like in some cases, a bare incorporation.
What are some of the barriers to growth? One thing, of course, there's some physical barriers in terms of how many NVIDIA chips are actually available in the world to make this happen. I think talent is another one, how much talent is available to this. But do you see this, what will actually be sort of what will be the determining factor that set the pace for this growth going forward?
Those are both very real right now. Technical talent, like the talent that can build this stuff. If you're building a foundation model company where you're inventing the technology, that talent is scarce and expensive. Access to chips is really important. So access to the compute, because if you're training massive data sets, you got to get the data, but then you need the compute to train it on. So one of the big competitions in the last year and a half has been getting dedicated compute from basically the hyperscalers. Part of the competition is you're competing against their internal teams. So Google, there's huge demand from DeepMind and from Google Brain to do the training internally. And then it takes time. So the amount of backstory you have in building this helps. If you're coming now, you're coming years later than some of the incumbents. And then, of course, it's all the other usual things like, can you build a product people want instead of just building what you think people want? Can you figure out how to sell it into an organization in a way that is, you don't have to customize every time, right? And it can scale. Can you figure out the pricing models? And so all of those pieces are challenges, but the opportunity is enormous. So, and it won't just be companies that have the technical depth. You'll have companies that just build great products using other people's technology. You've seen some of those start to emerge now, or they'll have some hybrid of the underlying foundation models come from an OpenAI or a Cohere or Anthropic, and then they'll fine tune and they'll build something specific on top for a particular industry. So I think it'll end up having a lot of the dynamics of what big tech, emerged from. So, Google started with a novel way of doing search that was probably better than others, but they had to build a product that made sense, and then a business model that made sense, and that's worked well.
CP Investments, of course, we are a long-term investor, and we manage this $500 billion plus portfolio, and of course, so that means that we really like to take a long investment horizon, and we like sort of high-quality assets that we can keep for a long time. When we think about diligencing this across our portfolio, how do we think about basically diligencing the AI risk and disruption risk, and how do you see larger companies and incumbents have a ability to mitigate some of this risk?
I think that when you're diligencing anything now, whether it's a financial product or infrastructure, industrial company, one of the ways you should look at it is through the prism of AI and how could this be disrupted or aided by AI. Some of it will just be in the background early on, like they'll use HR systems that are driven by AI. We met with a company recently that has invented a process to look at core samples in mining and better analyze the samples so you can better predict where to drill. And the revenue of this company has just gone like this because the big miners are coming along and saying, you're saving us a lot of time and money in just drilling randomly for samples and doing an eyeball analysis of it. You're able to get much more granular understanding of what's there, and so we can drill much more efficiently and we can mine more efficiently. That's a very analog process historically. It's never been changed. It's an example of a place that you should be thinking about that.
Maybe just touch on regulation briefly. I mean, how do you see this? I mean, this of course is both potentially a threat, but I guess it's also maybe an opportunity for the strong companies.
Regulation is going to be really important. There's kind of a spectrum of it. On one hand, it's regulation relating to data and whose data are you accessing? Have you done it legally? Are you preserving privacy? Are you kind of respecting existing laws about use of data? Somewhere along the spectrum, there's this question of harm, and the government has focused on this, as has European governments. And what you're creating have the potential to create harm? And where does the responsibility lie in the supply chain of AI? Is it with the researchers or is it with the end users who then are doing something harmful? And so that's been a debate that's been ongoing in the last few months. I think they're trending toward the end user, which is consistent with most other supply chains. But this is all new stuff. So there's a lot of thinking going on right now about that kind of regulation. And then on the extreme end of it, there are kind of more existential questions about AI weaponry. So should we have autonomous weaponry that is, if a drone is flying, should an AI be able to do self-targeting rather than have a controller of the drone be doing that? So right now, that's the way it works. You've got people that are controlling the drone and making targeting decisions. If you take that away and you give it to an AI, what does that mean? And should you be able to do that? And so among the research community, there's a very strong advocacy for banning that and basically creating a Geneva Convention around it. And so far, some companies have resisted that and said we will not agree, which means that other countries then also don't agree. And so you end up with this proliferation potentially of the technology. So I think there's a spectrum, but there's no question, like any new technology, it needs to be regulated. It's moving so fast that it's hard for governments to catch up. I think they're trying hard and listening and engaging, which is good. But there's going to be, AI will displace some lawyers maybe, but lawyers in regulation of AI are going to have a field day for a while.
I have 4 children, and actually I have some hope they'll be able to provide for themselves in the future. What should they be focusing on?
I've been asked this question a lot since we started the first company in 2010, and in the last few weeks in the AI community, there's been a lot more worry about what does the future of humanity look like if these machines can do everything better than us. I would say the number one quality that I hope they teach in schools is adaptability. I think that people come out, they're gonna end up changing what they do. Not necessarily changing a career completely. You're not going to start as a doctor and then end up as a musician necessarily, but the way that you practice medicine is going to change dramatically. And if you're in business, just the way that you have to adapt, I think that's going to be something that's virtually every job is going to experience. So, organizations are going to have to learn how to upskill people. A lot of this will happen in the background. So the technology, the application of it will be in the background. It'll be assistive. But at some point, there's this possibility that it just does everything better than we can do it. I don't know that really everything, but a lot of things. And so that has the potential to be quite transformative to, kind of the future generations. And so they could be studying one thing now in university and come out and it's just not as relevant. A very simple example of that, AI coding. There's just no question it's already in some organizations, 20% of the code is written by an AI. I don't think we're going to be in a situation where you learn something in high school and university and grad school, and then you stop learning and you can apply that for 40 years. It's going to be a constant learning and iterative process. So I think lifelong learning is going to be part of most careers. It'll be interesting to see how businesses adapt to that, but I would say I'm sure that people are not going to go into a job and have that job and do it the same way 5 years later, certainly not 10 years later.